Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the GameSpace Game Show, the only show where sometimes my co-hosts are just my imaginary friends. I'll be your host this evening. Steven is my name, as usual. If you've been a fan of the show, then you know who I am by now. But for those who haven't joined the show before, my name is Steven, and this week we're going to be hitting some news stories for a shorter show than usual due to some happenings this weekend with another show that I'm producing, and I have some family in town, but that's not why you're here. A weekend wouldn't be a weekend if it didn't start Friday with the GameSpace Game Show. So here we are kicking off your evening right. My co-hosts tonight are my imaginary friends everywhere here, and also you guys out there in Twitch and YouTube land. But in the off chance you also hear people on the podcast that aren't me and they are imaginary friends, then you might be going crazy. This week I'm going to just hit some highlights, which will include a few interesting tidbits I think are important to you, the gaming community. One such of those things of that nature is a story out of the UK where earlier this week, it was actually last Sunday, gamers found a program inside some of their favorite games, and the program is called Redshell, which is a form of tracking software that collects data about all of our habits as gamers, gaming, maybe shopping as well, and it created an uproar all over the interwebs. And so developers claim that the software isn't malicious in any way, but I mean, tracking software, come on. But after player pressure, anyway, Redshell has been removed from many of the popular games that it was put on. And that includes games like Elder Scrolls Online, Warhammer Vermintide 1 and 2, Conan Exiles, Omen Sight. But some developers have actually kept Redshell on their games with no plans to remove them, such as Civilization 6, Kerbal Space Program, Injustice 2, Soul Worker. I mean, these are big games that are doing this. So if you're worried about Redshell and the games that support it, there's a few lists online that you can check out, and I don't have all the lists handy here, but if you have a little Google foo in you, you should be able to find them pretty easily. Now, what you may be asking yourself is, because whenever I heard of the news, I was thinking, like, come on, what are they actually tracking here? So what exactly is Redshell, and what is it doing, and is it really a big deal? Well, ultimately, from the sources that wrote the story and put it out, what they have gathered and the people who found it, they found that Redshell is an attribution service which tracks advertising, much like the way Google Play and iPhone app stores do. All in all, it's pretty tough to get away with attribution services on the internet. I mean, in the sense of getting away from them. You can't really get away from them. I mean, Google is pretty much in everything. Google Analytics covers like a whole host of attribution services, which, you know, marketing companies buy these, and that's pretty much how Google made all its money, and they are where they are. So, you know, this goes out to marketing companies, pretty much anyone that pays for the data, you know, what ads we're looking at, what we're purchasing, all that kind of stuff. So it's meant to better direct those ads and, you know, tool them to the correct markets, which, depending on who you're asking, it could be good or bad. So once the data is collected, it's sent over to the company, and yes, it's used to tool ads, and our data is potentially sold as well. But according to the company that created Redshell, no data is personally identifiable. So that means, you know, it's not like they have our credit card numbers or our name or our address or anything like that. And they can't even really tell that the data came from your PC specifically, and that the accumulation and usage of said data is within the security guidelines of the GDPR. So basically they're saying that the data is secure. It's not illegal. It's not unsecured. So I'm of two minds on this one. One being that Redshell, if it's just a simple attribution program, it really isn't an issue. And in some cases, specifically for smaller games, it may be in many ways their lifeblood, if you think about it. Because the information they collect on players that play their game can be used in conjunction with information from other like-minded games, so that indie devs can create the correct advertising to find their market. It's a big upside for developers in that sense, like the small developers, which, I mean, how many small developers are really doing it? But, you know, small developers, indie developers, they don't have the advertising budget. So without knowing specifically how and who to market to, they're really going up against behemoths, you know, like, basically, ZeniMax was one of them. Obviously, like, they have way more money than some of these indie devs, and they're the ones using Redshell. So I don't see it as indie devs really using this all that much. But Redshell is being used on a whole host of different games and platforms. On the other hand, though, I mean, come on now, tracking in our games is freaking awful, all right? And to keep it hidden from us as players, it's even worse to use all that data to sell it, while we, the players, just sit by, you know, with our heads in the sands about it. I mean, they didn't even tell us that they were doing this. It had to be found out from the community and then brought up to them. So I think that if they want to keep using Redshell, there should be a simple opt-in. Most people probably would opt in. I mean, usually people do. It's like with the Steam surveys, people opt in for those surveys all the time. And I see we got Bowman out there. Hello, Bowman. Pleasure to see you this week. But that's not really what happened. They've been tracking our info and they haven't been telling us about it, and we've all been none the wiser. So to that, I say, small developers, you know, if you're doing this to your customers and you're not telling them about it, you know, you deserve what you get. And the big developers too, because transparency is key these days. If you're going to track and sell data, you best make people aware of that up front, and either require an opt-in, because, you know, while the data collected may not seem like a big deal to a company, it's not just for the developers to decide what is a big deal and what's not. I mean, for all we know, they could have been taking data that's important to us and sending it off, and we wouldn't have known. So the fact of the matter is, they're not really telling us what they're doing, and even now they're saying it's not a big deal, but it still kind of is a big deal. I mean, I think it's a big deal. Bowman out there thinks it's a big deal. He quoted, he said "evil bastards," which I agree with, and that's where I stand on the issue. If you're gonna do it, just set an opt-in, and if not, just disable the program. It kind of sucks that you would even still package it, but whatever. So that's pretty much what's going on with the big news story this week. As on to like the rest of the news, I guess that depends on who you ask if this is good or bad. Origin's Access Premier service is launching the 30th of July. By being an Access Premier member, subscribers will gain access to all of EA's new games, which includes Anthem and Battlefield 5, as well as the new Maddens and the FIFAs and all the things that they do. The old Origin Access is now called Origin Access Basic, which means everybody on it is now Basic. And it'll allow people to play games in the Basic library, which is all the old games, which they add games as time goes on, but it's old games, so you know. But you can also trial the new games for up to 10 hours, so you can, whenever Anthem comes out, you can play it for 10 whole hours, and then you have to decide, are you going to upgrade to the Premier or not. This could be a super big deal for people who are into these games and they don't like the sticker shock of buying a brand new game. For example, Anthem is probably going to release around the $60 range, and then you have all the stuff that they're going to release with it, $80 packs, sometimes $120 packs, and sometimes people just want to get in the game for as little money spent as possible. So I think that's probably not a bad idea. The downside of this service is that it's EA. And even though every now and then they'll put out some great games from time to time, they aren't exactly the most trusted company these days. So some people might think that this sounds too good to be true, that you get to play all these brand new games and it's only like a $15 buy-in. And they may think that there's just heavily monetized games, which we've seen in the past few years that it doesn't matter what the box price is. Everything's microtransactions upon microtransactions. And we learned that with Battlefront from EA. I mean, come on, guys. Like, the backlash on that, you would think that they wouldn't be stupid enough to do it again, but they will be stupid enough to do it again. So, Origin Access Premier is thus far set at a price of $15 a month in comparison to the basic, which is only $5 a month currently, or Premier is $99 a year in comparison to $30 a year for the basic. I don't really think the basic would mean very much to me because it doesn't have any of those new games. The 10 hours of playing a new game might be really good, but I don't really feel that it would be for me personally. I really want to play the new games, all the old EA games. If I've ever wanted to play them, I probably own them already. So my thoughts, totally encompassing the Origin Access Premier, is that it could probably be worse. They could be charging $20 a month for the Premier Access, but not that I would buy it if it was, and not that I'm even considering buying it now, but I think you could do worse. There was also a huge update to No Man's Sky over the past week, and if we recall, No Man's Sky at launch was and now we have Bowman on Twitch. He switched from YouTube to Twitch, says that he has EA access and he loves the stuff that it has. So there you go, there's an endorsement. I don't know many people who have it. I don't have it, but it's great. It just depends on if you, Bowman, are going to be going to the Premier version, because right now EA Access is awesome for the catalog that they have, but it's also only like $5 a month. Now, if it's $15 a month, you're looking at a much bigger subscription, but you're getting newer games. But is it really going to transfer over? I don't know. So I guess you're going to have to make a choice there. Are you going to stick with the basic, or are you going to go with the Premier? I don't know. For me, $15 a month isn't like a ton, but it just depends. Is Anthem going to be that great? If Anthem's going to be that good and I'm going to want to play it, I guess I'll pay $15 a month to play it. That's not that bad, but I could just buy the game outright as well. I mean, how many months would if I'm only playing Anthem, it would be what, like 5 months of playing the game? And if it's as good as they say it's going to be, it might be cheaper in the long run just to buy the game. I don't know. You got to weigh it. And let's talk about weighing the new update for No Man's Sky. Whenever it launched, it was, I wouldn't say it was panned. A lot of people thought it was an okay game, but people claimed that Hello Games didn't deliver what they said they would, like in the broad terms and expectations that people had based on the interviews that the developers did. And one such big deal was that No Man's Sky was such a big world, and you never saw anyone else in it, ever. You would go to people's planets that they, would name things, and they'd name the planets. but you wouldn't actually see the people. You could be on the same planet as somebody else, which the developers said that in itself would be like a big feat to do, because the world's so, I mean, the universe is so expansive. You would probably never run into another person, but people definitely did run into other people, and they did not see them. So there was no multiplayer in the game, and people were like, false advertising. That is not what you guys said over at Hello Games. You said that we could run into each other and all that. But now Hello Games has made an update to No Man's Sky, which is called Next, is the name of the update. It's a really big one. And what they've added, there's a lot more than just multiplayer, so now you'll actually be able to see other people. But players can now create colonies. They can fight epic space battles. Epic, I don't know how epic, but they can create racetracks and show people, you know, all sorts of different parts of their world through trails. And so they've definitely tried to deliver on what they originally planned to do or said, or what the community wanted. But where the real story kind of gets interesting is that people that purchased No Man's Sky, while the Steam version has multiplayer working with no issues, the GOG version does not, which is really weird. So the GOG version doesn't actually get the next update. So if you purchased it from GOG and you're like, where is the update that everyone's talking about? You're not going to find it there. And they're kind of working on remedying that. But Hello Games has said, hey, we don't know how long it's going to take to get that working. And a lot of people may have bought it on GOG and they're like, you know, and it's not working for them. So GOG is now offering extended refunds for those that purchased the game and they were hoping for the multiplayer update, but it hasn't come. Now, it's not a refund through Hello Games, but it's a refund through GOG, which is kind of an integrity move on their part. It's definitely not necessary. So while this is a word of warning for people who want to check out this new update, you know, I got to say good job to GOG for taking care of your customers, because you don't always see that. They could have just said, hey, you're screwed. You know, just wait for it to come out. You bought the game. Now just wait for the update. But they're not doing that. They're actually standing by it and saying, you know, if you want to go to another company to get the update faster, we'll give you a refund. So good for them. Lastly on my list for this week, because I do have another appointment coming up shortly, but I'd like to play a game that I like to call Where'd That Game Go? Where we try and determine where the hell a beloved game went off to, because it seems like it might be lost. Today's game is Marvel Ultimate Alliance with its sequel, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, which was plucked from all game stores aside from Steam, where it still shows, but it's unpurchasable, which is unpurchasable. That's a word, and I'll fight you if you say otherwise. The Marvel Ultimate Alliance series is gone, and what does this remind you of? I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of Marvel Heroes Omega, which is another action RPG in the same vein, and it got its license pulled and then swiftly left all markets, leaving little to no trace. So what does that mean? I mean, we don't really have the full story. I don't think it's because someone pushed a button by accident, but for my money, it looks like Disney pulled licensing again. But here it doesn't make sense. It made sense with Gazillion. Pull the licensing from Gazillion. You know, it was the game was misrun. The developers didn't really have a good focus, and they were working on a separate project. You know, then there was that whole thing that went down with the CEO. There's just like the brand Gazillion wasn't screaming Disney Marvel. So I understand pulling that, especially since it's like an ongoing MMO game, you know, but this was a single player game. Well, I mean, it was a co-op game, but still. And while those that own the game, or did own it at one point, still get to play it, the game is done. I mean, the game's out there already. It has been for a very long time. So unless there's like a very particular contract that Activision signed where like it's provisional licensing or something where they have to renew it every year, but for some reason they didn't, or they didn't want to pay licensing fees, or I don't know exactly what it is, then, you know, I don't know why this would happen to a single player game. It hasn't happened to many other games in the past, so why Disney's doing this? The only thing that I can really see maybe happening at some point is that if Marvel and Disney re-release these games under their own publishing company, maybe. Not saying that's even on the radar of things that Disney Marvel are planning to do. I know that they're talking about doing a streaming service in the same way that, you know, once the Fox deal goes through, but that's mostly entertainment media, that, you know, movies, shows, but not games. But I wonder if maybe that is something that they're looking into at some point. And really that's the best I can hope for, that, you know, they do something to where we can play these games. Now it's not that I don't own both games. I mean, if you're looking at my hat, my background, you can see I'm a big Marvel fan. So, I mean, I definitely own the games, and I plan to stream the games, over this next week. And that was just to encourage people to play, you know, more superhero games and things like that, to show that we like them and we want them to be on other, you know, other platforms aside from mobile, because it seems like everything that's been superhero lately has been mobile games. But, you know, now that the game's gone and people can't really join me in playing the game, I think I'm going to maybe stream it for a couple weeks in protest, just to protest that, you know, if we can get at least a little turnout, we can try and get them to bring it back. I doubt that's going to happen, because our new channel is very new, but, you know, hey, protest, whatever. And that's pretty much all the news I have for this week, mostly because I've been exceptionally busy getting lots of other content ready to get out. And that's a good thing for everybody. I promise it's a good thing, because we have big shows with some great developers coming up. If you're worried that this podcast is a little short, well, that's because this week we also have an unveiling of a new podcast, called The Hero Signal, which is a cast all about superheroes, which includes superhero games, movies, comics, shows, pretty much everything that has to do with superheroes, even anime superheroes and manga. And it will be hitting Sunday along with this podcast. So also, if you have time, pop on over to The Hero Signal's YouTube page, or Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Because last week at the San Diego Comic-Con, a new Marvel game that's supposed to be releasing called Marvel Battle Lines was mentioned. It isn't out in the US yet, but they showed a little bit of it at the Comic-Con and people watched it. And I got a lot of people asking me, like, what the frogs? Like, what is this game? It doesn't make any sense. I'm watching these trailers. Nobody explains anything to me. The game looks ridiculously weird. So it is out in Singapore and it is out in Australia. So I went over there and picked up the game, and I went through the entire tutorial, and I posted the video of it, which it takes you through the whole tutorial and then a little bit. It shows you a little bit about the dailies, and you know, if you're interested in seeing what this new game's about, or if you have any questions like how can I get into the game now, I can definitely do a video showing you guys how to get into the game if you want to try it now. But I am going to do a preview of it on GameSpace, and I'll tell you guys all about what I've experienced. I pretty much completed the entire game that they have completed thus far, which probably is why it hasn't released in the US yet, because they don't have enough content to keep going over and over and over. But the cards look great. The gameplay is not something I've experienced on a mobile device before. It's like a mix between chess and tic-tac-toe. You didn't think you could mix those, but you definitely can. So head on over to the Hero Signal. We're on pretty much everywhere. Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, all the places. And then our podcast will be on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and that goes for the GameSpace game show as well. We we're everywhere. We're basically everywhere. Like, if you can't find us, I don't know how you're even hearing me say this to you right now, because if you can't find us, you've already found us if you're listening to me. So just search for us and we'll be there. But that pretty much covers it. I got through the entire 30-minute stream, and I think that's pretty great for a solo cast this week. We love all you guys who support us for GameSpace.com, MMORPG.com, and the Hero Signal. I guess see us next week. We may or may not have a developer on, but we do have Visionary Realms and Pantheon Devs coming up in August, so you're not going to want to miss that one. But aside from that, we will see you next week on our show. Have a good weekend.